People talk of the immortal trilogy of sex, drugs and rock and roll. Was it like that at the beginning in the 50s?
Well, absolutely. I mean, rock and roll came from amphetamine. I mean, during the war, all the combatants, the governments of all the combatants made amphetamine tablets in their millions. I think the British government gave 72 million amphetamine tablets to British troops. The Japanese, Germans, Americans did the same. Hitler was being injected with methamphetamine 5 times a day. So when the war was over, there was a lot of tablets sloshing around, which would be nice to be able to sell off. So the governments sort of sold them off. And an awful lot of them ended up in the southern United States. And truck drivers in America used them, and the rock and roll players, country music players who they drove around used them. And slowly country music got faster and faster and turned into rock and roll, directly because of amphetamine.
So Bill Haley was country and western on amphetamines?
Basically, amphetamine is just, amphetamized country and western music is what rock and roll is.
What happened when rock and roll arrived here?
Well, rock and roll arrived here by having succeeded first in America. It didn't develop or come out of that sort of thing here at all. But what it was here, which was so exciting, was that the music business prior to rock and roll had been show songs, show tunes, middle-aged singers, ballads, and appealing mainly to the parents, not to the kids. The kids didn't have music for themselves. And the kids in those days went to films, and the big magazines for teenagers were Picture Go and things like that. Now, suddenly, with rock and roll, they had music of their own. And it was a copy of the American music. So the amphetamines, in fact, were around in London just the same, but that wasn't the creation of the music. It was just copying American music.
One of your first jobs, as you say in the book, was rolling reefers for Johnny Dankworth.
No, that wasn't the job. That was a little side work. I worked as a roadie, in those days called a band boy for the Johnny Dankworth band, which meant unpacking instruments and carrying them up and down 5, 6 stories and Llandudno Empire and things like that, setting up the drums. But occasionally on the way home, retired musicians would like a little smoke, and I was the person elected to roll them.
What about LSD? Is the sound, say, of Sergeant Pepper the sound of LSD?
Well, it totally was. I mean, absolutely. The LSD really created in people's minds a new, dreamy world, and it came out in music enormously. Again, in all the groups, even the Small Faces is another good example, still seen as pillheads, still smoking their joints, but taking LSD, so their music really became very, very disparate indeed.
You call the book Black Vinyl, White Powder. That's presumably cocaine. Has that always been there?
You hear the sound of that more in people speaking than you do in the music. Musically, I wouldn't have thought it had very much difference from amphetamine. It's a very short-lived drug. You take cocaine and you're high for a very short time. What it does, though, it fires people up. It's the perfect drug for a bullshit music business, where people talk and like to talk rubbish and do deals on the basis of rubbish. People who don't take cocaine, who are the best in the business, usually sound like they're taking it anyway. That's the sort of music business talk.
I wonder how much of the book you had to leave out for legal reasons.
Not too much, really. What it was more a lot of quotes. People gave me some fabulous quotes, and sometimes the last little bit of the quote, a big punchline, had to get left out. The punchline would include a couple of things which the lawyers felt very worried about. I mean, some of them not very much at all. There was one by John Burgess, one of the 60s record producers at EMI, who was talking about Len Wood, who was the manager of EMI for 5 years and managed to make the most successful company in England almost bankrupt. And none of his staff got on with him very well, and none of them had very nice things to say about him. And John had said, at his last part of his quote, he was not only incredibly mean, he was incredibly boring. And the lawyer made me take it out, because nowadays you can be liable. Being told you're boring is a libelous action. But he died 3 weeks ago, so I can tell you the story, and that was one which was taken out. But he didn't die in time to get it in the book, unfortunately. It'll go in the paperback edition next year.
You came into this business when it was exciting. Now it's corporate. Is it cleaner? Are there fewer drugs?
No, there's more drugs than ever. There's more money, there's more drugs. But they're so accepted now, that's not even thought of as being sort of dirty, so to speak. It's just a normal part of the business.